So, Curt, Microsoft, I think, developed in such an interesting narrative in terms of technology. For the longest time, Microsoft was kind of outside of the public sector, thinking that the public sector didn't really matter. Then I think you have Bill Gates taking this social entrepreneurship, innovative approach to philanthropy, which again is a workaround for the public sector, although he learned some definite lessons with the Gates Foundation on that. How is Microsoft not doing a workaround of the public sector, but actually embracing and doing partnerships with the public sector?
Sure, John. I would say, public sector is a critical part of our overall business. I've been in Microsoft public sector in the US for 27 years at Microsoft. And since that time, we've really focused on sort of how do we enable technology. Some of our biggest customers, Department of Defense, is an example, or cities. And I think our focus as a company of really empowering every individual and organization to achieve more, lends itself very well to smart city concepts and sort of this approach. And the point, to Bob's comment and sort of looking at smart cities, the one thing about technology, cloud is a great equalizer. Now cities that are smaller of scale, like, that aren't the size of New York or maybe don't have the IT budget, can benefit from, the capabilities that the cloud brings and enabling that in great ways. And so those are the things that we're focused on in public sector at Microsoft, to take our cloud capabilities of Azure, but make sure they're relevant in public sector. Specifically, they asked about security. Well, New York Police Department, and using our technology, needs to make sure that they're compliant with the criminal justice standards that the FBI sets forth. It's a standard that every state Department of Justice then needs to sign off on so that the criminal justice data is protected. And so we have focused to make sure our cloud enables that. In the federal government, it's FedRAMP compliant. In health, everyone probably is aware of HIPAA compliance. And so making sure you fuse those regulatory requirements that are necessary into the cloud sort of allows this expansion and discussion in new ways. And I think, when we talk about innovative startups, those companies that understand that intersection between sort of the great capabilities of the cloud, but also the necessity that there's going to be regulation and regulators. And so we need to bridge that divide together. We need regulators to lean forward and understand what technology can bring, but we also need, great startups to appreciate, well, there's a reason that they need this. There's a reason that a city needs this information, or there's a reason that that we have this. And so how do we work together? I think that's where we're seeing great progress being made, and I think really continue to build out this principle of smart city.
Well, let's talk a little bit about HIPAA and how you embrace the regulations of FedRAMP, et cetera. I mean, don't you also have to be a company that says, you're hampering your capability here with this particular regulation? It's not to do the very primitive discussion of regulation bad, market good, because that really is not going to get us anywhere. But do you have to be an entrepreneur and say, this regulation could be so much better if? How do you do that? How do you
absolutely.
do that?
It's absolutely a two-way street. And in many places where we see that government and regulators are open to that discussion, where is technology headed? We have those meetings and bringing together engineers from our respective organizations, with public sector entities to show what is the art of the possible? What does this mean from a societal perspective, and what's the impact? I mean, we're living that today. The question came up with encryption. I mean, we're living that today as a worldwide society of what are our laws? What is data sovereignty? What does that mean? Because we want to enable capabilities in the cloud and not have stovepipes of data. It does no one any good of, every particular city wants to have their own, data center. I think the cloud brings ambient intelligence that we can build systems on in new ways. So we need to make sure they're secure and, find that happy medium that says that there's a comfort. I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about trust. Security is about trust. And in public sector, there's different ways that they view trust. The Department of Defense, we have some elements that use our cloud. There's others that have higher degrees of security, and so you work to implement those because they have the requisite need for that. But I would say that there's an embrace of this across public sector on the elected official side who understand that we want to move things forward and get things done, forward-leaning innovators within the organization that can translate. I think sometimes the biggest thing that we need is someone to help translate the technology, because we're not necessarily smart on why the regulation, and sort of work through that. Sometimes you have to work it through politically, congressionally, relative to laws. But I would say there is a new embrace and an understanding of this, and we're going to have to continue to work through it.
Clint, the title of this panel is Fire, Aim, Ready, with the idea that cities can get out of sequence the implementation modalities that are really, really important. I mean, Fire, Aim, Ready suggests that cities are inclined to take action without thinking about the consequences. I find in the political system that inaction it's more like ready, 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 but we'll never fire, and aiming is not even part of the picture. How do you get cities to be confident enough in the financing of what it is they want to do in these first steps to really aim and do something with some serious long-term planning?
Well, government is a really broad term. And if you look at it as a global governments, federal government, state government, city and municipal government, the space that I work in is the lower end, and it's more nimble. And an example I'll give you is when we were out talking to Tesla and asking Elon Musk about how quickly did he think driverless vehicles would be available out in the market, and they're saying a few years. I then traveled from the West Coast to the East Coast and went to Washington, D.C. and listened to the Secretary of Transportation with the very same question, say, I really think we can see this in the next 20 years or so. And so there's a real disconnect between that which we regulate and the speed to market. And so the message that I'm creating for cities is don't eat the whole apple with one bite. Take small chunks that, when we were talking to you all earlier about the backpacks that generate energy, and I think what you said to me was that the device that collects the energy, we needed to standardize. And then we needed those which were creating the energy to be able to adapt to the device where we were retrieving the energy. So the standards can be set at a federal level while allowing innovation, so long as the connectivity, which we're going to talk about all day long, is appropriate such that that which is creating the electricity can communicate and connect with the device that's receiving the electricity.
Although I worked in Washington, and I've been a member of the media for like 35 years, and and anybody who says, I think we're going to be able to see those in 20 years is basically saying, not in my lifetime, because they're not going to be there in 20 years. They don't, unless you're saying we can do this tomorrow, you're probably not engaged in the process. If you say it'll happen in 20 years in Washington, you're just basically washing your hands of the whole thing and saying I'm not going to be a part of it. You're just sort of spitballing that 20-year idea.
I want the record to reflect that you said that and not me.
Yeah, well, see, that's the either people are really involved and they want to do it tomorrow, which is kind of you, and I think I sense that you've had some of those meetings. Sure. Or you're just making one of these, broad predictions of someday we'll all live on Mars and have jetpacks, and nobody's actually going to take the step to do it tomorrow. Who in the political system is more likely to do that? Is that always at the municipal level? Is it ever at the federal level?
I think it might be. I think it needs, we've used the word leaders before. I'm going to use the word rule breakers because I think that which follows the rule always sometimes stifles innovation. I think those that are willing to get the product out there, allow them to test it and see that it works and break it a few times and reinvent it are the ways to get things moving. And so I do think, John, that there's a balance between the innovators and speed to market and pushing that product out and testing the regulators show me that this isn't a safe product. I mean, I've been to several states where they say, you know, Uber just isn't going to work. It's not safe. It doesn't do all of these things for me. And then I ask the same group that's telling me that, how many of them have been in an Uber? And none of them had. And so naturally, you know, those that are fearful of advancements in technology are usually those people that don't understand it very well. So it requires a lot of us to be really good storytellers and take really deep dives that we do as an engineering company all the time and consolidate it into well, John Hockenberry used this, and this is how it was used, instead of telling you how it was put together, which is a real proclivity of engineering, is we want to tell you how we put it together. We sometimes don't take time to say what the value proposition is. So I think storytelling, I think rule breaking, I think moving things speed to market, creating momentum, I think those are all things that are going to help innovation move the needle on regulation kind of back towards the middle.
And I would add, John, to that point, that transformation will create, naturally is going to create tension in public sector. To Uber, you know, electeds at a city level probably didn't pay much attention until they realized the financial impact to the particular regulated industry, and that industry elevated the discussion and dialogue, or the impact of Airbnb relative to the tax dollars coming in, and again, another part of regulation. And so that forcing function opens a dialogue. And so, you know, innovative elected officials who grasp sort of those transformational changes are going to have a discussion. Or conversely, the conversation in cloud now in the space that I live in changed radically based on all the hacking that's going on. My dialogue is not about whether the cloud is safe at this point. It's a discussion about the fact that the cloud is actually more secure than many of the implementations on premise. And that actually you harness the impact of cloud and all the information that you're getting to actually protect you more securely. And the investments companies like Microsoft and others are making in the cloud is more than a particular, you know, federal government agency or a city can keep up with. And so, you know, I think those natural tensions allow leaders to step forward and say, I'm going to move forward, and here are my proof points. And we're seeing that across the space. And so, you know, I would agree with Clint that, you know, at all levels of government, you find those leaders, it does have to be top down. I mean, it absolutely has to be top down, and I think
so within a city, it's got to be top down.
It's got, you know,
Within
mayors
a state,
got.
it's got to be. All right,
Go ahead, Bob.
I would say there's a top-down element. There has to be top-down support.
Yep.
But for the actual development, a lot of the technologies,
agree.
and for the development and the use of those technologies, there has to be significant bottom-up refinement.
Yep.
We found that when we deployed our kiosks, the first thing the mayor said was, figure out how to connect to the citizens. And the problem I had was the vast majority of them, I mean, for the under 30 set, this was it. And that was all they needed. For my father-in-law, he needed something he could actually relate to. And so I put a 7-foot-tall iPhone smack in the middle of Grand Street. And then I let my 8-year-old go up and help him to figure out where the data he needed to access resided. And what that allowed us to do is customize that. That piece of equipment has been on the ground for about a month and a half now. We have fundamentally changed the software in it 4 times in that month and a half based on feedback, because there is a 311 function there. There is a direct line to us so that we're able to figure out how to make it work. And the bottom line is, I think that 7-foot-tall iPhone will be gone 15 years from now. Because actuarially speaking, my father-in-law will not need to use it at that point. And that's okay. We will evolve and we will change with that.
And the kids will figure it's kind of like 2001, a monolith from some alien civilization. And
Just like the phone booth.
Well,
Right,
although it is
exactly.
cool because it's turned into a social thing too. It's gotten a lot of my younger population to get their heads out from this mode and to actually say, meet me at a kiosk. And then they can actually share about what restaurant they want to eat at. They can look at whatever performance they want to see the review of. They can see the movie reviews before they walk in the door to the movie theater. So it actually is causing people to get their heads up off their phone instead of in and to it, which we didn't expect, but it's been kind of fun.